Sunny, OCG duelist Sunny with another hopefully banger about the OCG format, about the current situation in the OCG. I always love hearing Sunny talk about the current situation in the OCG, because I feel like from the current perspective, the OCG is healing, and that's good because those cards are going to be coming to our format soon-ish. And that's always great to get a little bit of perspective of what's about to happen with the game. Of course, I am most interested in hearing about Vanquish Soul K9, Vanquish Soul K9, which is currently a new top tier deck in the OCG, which I think is very cool. And the video is titled "The Best Format Since Age of Overlord," which is a bold statement, but let's see what they have to say about this current OCG format that we are also going to be playing soon-ish, right? This is already our format into like for Euros and NAWCQ, or is it like is that after? It's definitely after national season, but we get the next set soon-ish, I believe. I don't know if we already know when we're gonna get the next deck build pack, but right after Euros, maybe. Yeah. All right, let's go.
I feel like we don't talk enough about how well Konami has been doing with card design. I'm more optimistic than
glazing.
This, but every format since Crossover Breaker has...
Glazing Konami is a dangerous path to go down, I will tell you, because as soon as you say anything positive about Yu-Gi-Oh or Konami, people will call you a sellout. They will. It doesn't matter that you're not paid for it. They will call you paid for it. I speak from experience.
Been good.
So be careful what you say, Sonny. If it's positive
for 2-month Alliance Inside format, and that has never been more true than right now. What makes a format good is obviously subjective. It's how good someone thinks the gameplay of a format is, but I know many people share similar views to mine. The current meta is fantastic right now. To explain, I have to go...
But you are paid, but not for my opinion on certain things. I'm paid for certain collaborations with Konami. I'm not paid for saying, you know, the game is all good. As you will definitely hear me critique certain things about the game that I don't like. Constantly. It happens. I say when I dislike stuff, I say when I like stuff. And that's how it should be.
Over what I didn't like about older metas. There were several main problems I had with previous formats. All of them are quite related, but have different effects on gameplay that I didn't like. The first is extremely powerful one-card starter combos. Examples would be Yubel, or Snake Eyes, or Memento, and Tenpai, honestly. The main problem is that there wasn't a better strategy than Floodgates, blowout hand traps, or a very large amount of normal hand traps, which makes gameplay very much a yes-no question on the first action as opposed to different boards, which meant a lot of games felt the same. You would test for extenders and accept that you were FTK'd if they had them. The second is that normal hand traps often had no impact.
I don't want to spend too much time on this because this is something we've been through all of 2024. This is not a hot take. This is a cold take. Everyone agrees with this. And I think the main purpose of the video is probably what's happening now as opposed to what's happening last year. This is probably just the introduction part.
Because
so I don't want to
too easy to repair with an identical combo extender. For example, take any Memento starter. If you get Impermed on it, then it quickly repairs the combo to be an identical board, or like Tenpai, Imperm Hydra, and then they just activate Kaiman or Summoning or Tundra. And that's why I loved Ryzeal, because Ryzeal was one of the first strong decks in many months where strategic hand trap held for duo drive had a noticeable impact on the end board, and you didn't make an identical full board.
Okay. So Ryzeal is controversial because there's also a lot of people that hate Ryzeal, but I personally agree with Sunny here. The thing about Ryzeal that has kind of changed is that Ryzeal now feels more like the previously mentioned examples. Because with the introduction of Star Ryzeal, you no longer have the duo drive choke point, basically, which was like the main thing that was always my argument as to why I thought playing against Ryzeal felt better than playing against Malice, for example, in that format, previous format. Was always like, if I could out the duo drive with Ghost Ogre, Ash, Veiler, Imprem, whatever I was playing, if I held that card for duo drive, I knew what I was facing, and what I was facing was you were able to handle it if your deck was good, right? If your deck was able to handle Detonator, then it was simple, like hold the hand trap for duo drive and then deal with the Detonator and you're good to play a solid match of Yu-Gi-Oh! That was last format. With the testing I've done for the current format, after Alliance Insight, I do think Ryzeal now falls into a different category. because now with Star Ryzeal being played in Pure Ryzeal, as well as even Mitsurugi Ryzeal is playing that card now, basically enabling you to get to Ryzeal Cross in a second like way, not just Duo Drive. It's just like, now if my opponent starts with Ice Ryzeal and I have Imperm in hand, I no longer can afford to hold it actually the Imperm is a bad example because you could still hold it for Duo Drive, but they will still have Cross. But like, let's say it's Veiler or Ash, right? It's no longer possible to just hold it for the Duo Drive. If they go Ice and you have Veiler, I think you Veiler the Ice now. I think you now Veiler the Ice, which in previous formats was probably not advised, depending on your hand. And sometimes maybe you would, but most of the time you wouldn't. Now you're kind of forced to. And you kind of accept the fact that if you Veiler the Ice and they have Sword or X'd in hand, or another way to get a level 4 to make Duo Drive, they still do the full thing, right? And so, like, that's iffy. Like, the Ryzeal now is... I would not defend Ryzeal now the same way I used to defend Ryzeal pre-Alliance Insight. Because you know what I said about, like, comparing Ryzeal to Malice. Even though Ryzeal was the more powerful deck, I felt like it was so much more healthy for the game than Malice. Now, I think the current versions of Ryzeal are way more combo-heavy, and Star Ryzeal makes it, like, way more ignorant into fair hand traps. So I don't feel the same way about Ryzeal anymore. Yeah.
With one extender. The third is that engines were too small. That's not to say that decks at the moment all have massive engines, but it is disturbing when it almost seemed like a mandatory requirement for a deck to have space for 18 non-engine. It's more that decks can play more engine now if they want to, because one, normal hand traps are not extremely impactful against top meta decks at the moment, and two is that most top decks have extremely good lingering floodgate compromises because they can play on their opponent's turn, and the third is that final end boards for the most popular decks became smaller. There are some combo decks with massive boards still in the format, but essentially Konami had found a way to design cards in such a way that more card activity just ended up outclassing raw power in terms of winning consistently. So even though there are still combo decks, they end up being not as popular unless you really love combo decks or the archetype. Honestly, I can't believe they did it so effectively. I thought that there was no way to do it and we would just be locked in one card combo format forever. A consequence of this high activity is that it leads to new gameplay patterns that I would say are pretty much never seen in older metas. It is probably not well liked because it relates to Charmies and Maxies, but because decks are so actionable on your turn, it is actually a good idea to just Charmy on your turn in a lot of situations. It obviously depends on match.
This is something that we are starting to see in the TCG as well. People are realizing that, hey, Molcharmy Meowls in particular is actually quite good against certain Mitsurugi boards. But yeah, it's kind of like, I do kind of resonate with what they're saying here is like, in 2024, I did not think I was gonna like Yu-Gi-Oh! As much in 2025 as I am liking it right now. Like, I'm not happy about every single facet of the game right now. There is decks that I dislike. There is certain cards that I think should be banned in Master Duel or TCG, right? Like that's a thing. You're always gonna have something that you feel like could make the game even better. But overall, on a satisfaction level, with 2025 Yu-Gi-Oh, I'm like so much happier than I thought I was gonna be looking at the trends in 2024. And I think it's impressive, honestly, with how quickly, in quotation marks, we've done that turnaround. Because, you know, it's just like we're going from Snake Eye, Yubel, Tenpai in 2024. We're going to like, I mean, the my least favorite deck in 25 so far, I guess, is Malice, which is like, I don't like it, but it's nowhere near as bad as those decks, right? And I think that's good. I think that's good, and I also don't expect to like every single deck in the format. Like, the Yu-Gi-Oh is a game that's like super old at this point. There's a lot of different archetypes, a lot of different types of decks, and that's okay. And I'm not gonna vibe with every single one of them. I feel like that's something I've just kind of have to come to terms with. That like there is gonna be decks in the format that I find annoying to play against or whatever. That's just, I guess, something that's gonna exist as long as those decks are not overwhelmingly powerful, right? Like how Snake Eyes was. So like maybe it's okay that Malice exists and I'm not a fan of it. I don't enjoy playing against it as much, as long as it's not tier 0, which it doesn't seem like it is. So I think that's okay, right? But I do think that the pace at which they did it was decent, right? We've gone from like one year to another year, and it's just like already looking so much better. And hopefully, because the thing is, we're not completely free of issues in Yu-Gi-Oh! At the moment, but we are moving in the right direction. And I think that's the most important thing to note, right? Because good direction means it's likely going to be even better in 2026. Hopefully, fingers crossed, you know. Of course, releasing one other super broken archetype could ruin it again, but like at the moment, it's looking like we're going in a solid direction.
And circumstance, but I'll give a couple of examples. Duelist Advance released, I had a K9 player win dice roll and then do first action Fool Loss. I wasn't paying that much attention because it was just a local, so I asked if he sent me first for some reason, but no, he just started his turn with Fool Loss. For a deck like Pure K9, it actually makes sense to do this. K9 has no way to convert the Fool Loss dead in their hand, so you might as well activate it and draw if your opponent has Izna or Femena or Holy Sue, and they were going to trigger the Izna anyways because their engine activates in the hand, as opposed to a deck such as Yummy, where if they didn't activate the Fool Loss on their turn, they weren't going to trigger Izna in the first place. Here's another example. I was playing Yummy yesterday, so I had 2 Fuas against Striker, and on Ray Effect, it's obvious they were going to summon 0. So I could drop both my Fuas and draw 2, but considering the Striker compromise under Fua is actually good, it was better to split up my 2 Fuas because it threatens the 0 summon, the Ray Effect, the Lemnis Gate, and the linkage.
I will say something about the Charmies real quick, because they are kind of leaning into the Charmies being a very relevant thing in this format right now. So I like the Charmy cards, right? I have said that before. I do think the Charmy cards overall are solid for the game. They're not all good. There is negatives about them, but I think overall they are good for the health of the game. I think Charmies, we are kind of like in this middle period where we are hopefully moving away a little bit from these like crazy broken combo boards and 1-card combos doing everything and decks having room for 20 hand traps and everything. The thing is, we are kind of in this middle period right now, I feel like, where they are designing decks that are better and better into the fair hand traps, quote unquote, right? Like, you will notice this the more you play the current format, like cards like Imperm, Veiler, even Ash Blossom, if you're using it on your opponent's turn defensively, they don't feel like they're it anymore. You know, they don't feel like they quite do the job, which I guess is fine, because they did give us Charmies as a replacement. Well, it's just me personally, though. I don't like the fact that, like, I'm incentivized to main deck Charmies right now. I think Charmies are at its best when they're kind of, like, situated in the side deck for the most part. I don't like that I'm considering main decking 6 or even more Charmies right now in my deck, because I hate the idea of just, like, going first and drawing those dead cards. Maybe that is a way of balancing going first and second, though, right? Overall, if you look at it from an overarching perspective, if people are main decking Charmies, that makes their going first a little bit weaker. And if your opponent also plays Charmies, that makes your going first even weaker on top of that. So, like, sometimes this format, I feel like going first is a disadvantage, depending on how the hands play out. Like, sometimes I open 2 Charmies, my opponent opens 1 or 2 Charmies, I'm going first. My Charmies are not good non-engine on their turn, but they just Charmy me, so I can't make a proper board. And so actually it helps going second a lot, right? I personally don't love that I feel like I'm forced to play these cards in the main deck right now. I would feel much better if I could side deck them. But it's like, it's overall still fine. Like, it's got pros and cons, basically. And I'm just like noticing some of the cons, but they also have a lot of pros, of course, like making going first a lot weaker than it used to be in certain other formats. Even though, like, that's the thing, right? Going first right now is not a guarantee to win because of Charmies. The decks are still pretty good at going first, like Malice and Mitsurugi and Ryziel. They're still pretty good cards at going first. Those decks are very strong, and Charmies being in the format kind of like holds it all together without making going first too auto-win. I wish there was another way to do that doesn't like completely punish you for main decking it in so many games where you're going first, but kind of like it's kind of okay-ish. It's just something I wanted to bring up. I think it's just in general an not very satisfying to draw cards going first that you just can't use, right? I think that's just something I don't love, is drawing cards that I can't use. It's kind of like the driver issue. That's why I've always hated playing with Gamma, even though Gamma is a powerful card, but I just hate the idea of playing driver in my deck. And like going first, basically all the Charmies are kind of like drivers in your deck.
For my turn, It applies more with Maxi than Charmies, of course, because you would draw 3 off of Izuna as opposed to 1 off Izuna, but specific Charmies against certain decks will be similar. There are just so many decks that are summoning 4 or more times on your turn right now. Another great thing about the format is that a lot of the older annoying cards, such as Appaloosa or Floodgates, are much less common. Most decks can't make Appaloosa, and Pankratops being in every deck makes those cards lose power. If you can play Tikaboo, you would still play Tikaboo, and some people choose Anti-Spell, but in general, most people are on some sort of Solemns for their going first card of choice, which is just much less annoying. My explanation is a little bit messy this time because it's just based on how I feel, but I believe the best part about the format is that because decks are more engine heavy than before, and because most decks play so differently from each other, it feels like each game is very different, and that's something I feel like hasn't been present in a format really since AGOV. The format has what I like to describe as true diversity. For example, if you ask me, I will say Yugioh Malice format was more diverse than Snake Eyes format. Snake Eyes format had more top decks such as Snake Eyes, or Yubel, or Tenpai, or Memento. But all of them have the same type of gameplay feeling.
Yeah.
And you got one shot by all of them, and it just had different pictures on their cards. Yugioh Malice.
No, this is a good point. This is a good point because legitimately, those decks they mentioned are essentially the same deck. Snake Eye and Yubel is the same shit. I guess Memento wasn't as popular for us and is like more combo. I feel like more difficult, less linear maybe, but maybe that's just wrong. Tenpai was just the same in different, like it literally just looked different. It went second because the combo required you to have a battle phase, but it was literally the same gameplay. Just stop your opponent from playing, resolve 1 card, win the game. So that 100% in terms of your gameplay experience, I think that is true. The gameplay, even if Yugioh and Malice had only 2 top tier decks, which is arguably there was more, but like because like Fiendsmith control and whatever, but it's like 2 decks that play differently versus everything trying to do the same thing.
May have had less decks that were considered top meta decks, but the viable decks at least all play very differently. Currently, in my opinion, Duelist Advanced format has over a dozen playable decks. The 4 you see on screen right now are what most people consider to be the best decks of the format, and I also share this opinion, hence why I have made 4 videos on these individual decks. But that's not to—
So this is Vanquish Soul K9, Yummy, Malice, and Draco Tail. Which that checks out from the last OCG report I've looked at, but there is more than that. I would tend to agree from what I'm seeing. There's other decks you can play. Like they're probably going to mention it, but off the top of my head, I know White Forest is at least playable. I think Orchist is at least playable. I think Blue Eyes is at least playable.
Say other decks are unplayable. I would say a lot of the rogue decks right now actually have a matchup that is completely fine into some of these decks, but the reason they're rogue is because they have a very mad matchup into one of these, or they're just outclassed in a certain aspect, whether that's consistency or playing into the popular non-engine. For example, I think that Memento is not at all incompetent into the Justice Hunter decks engine to engine, but it is extremely bad into Malice as well as the non-engine of the format. Striker is a more playable deck, and it matches up fine against most of these decks, but executes its game plan a bit less consistently and is also kind of taking collateral damage from Vanquish Soul. Crystron K9 is arguably as good as these, but it's just worse into blowout hand traps and going second compared to Vanquish Soul. So the gameplay of the format will primarily be how these 4 decks match up against each other. Some of these also have many hybrid builds that I'll talk about. To make it short, pretty much all these decks can beat each other. The worst in my opinion is Dragon Tail against Vanquish Soul. Most people will probably agree that matchup is quite difficult, but the other ones all match up fine into each other and are pretty close to even, or at least close enough to the point where pilot skill will be the difference consistently. I have my own opinions about some of them. For example, I actually thought Justice Hunter format was a bit of a triangle format. I think Malice is marginally unfavored against Yummy, and Yummy is slightly unfavored against Dragon Tail, and Malice is favored against Dragon Tail, but not even all players agree with me, which is the beauty of the format. People can't even agree on what decks beat each other. And that's kind of why I thought Last Road of the King post looks the way it does, with Vanquish Soul first, Yummy close second, and then Malice and Dragon Tail afterwards.
They are pretty close to each other for all things considered. Like even a 7% difference between Draco Tail and Yummy is like not that much. But yeah, there's White Forest. Oh, Lunalight was also there, yeah.
Has a very favored matchup against Dragon Tail. Then there's going to be less Dragon Tail and Malice while Yummy gets better. Before Duelist Advance, Malice, Yummy, and Dragon Tail were pretty much the same representation every single week. To be honest, by far the most annoying matchup for all of these decks, in my opinion, is playing into themselves. In general, I think combo decks are not very good.
Okay, that's an interesting sentence that I would like to focus on more, because what do you mean by annoying? Because if annoying means the mirror matches are bad, then I think that is not a great sign. Even though, I mean, the format is diverse, but I think one factor for a format for me to truly like it, the mirror matches of the popular decks have to be at least solid. You know, if a mirror match is terrible, that is one thing I will absolutely hate a deck for. If the mirror match is like not skill based or whatever, like if there's like a mirror match where the player going first just wins because they're both combo decks or whatever, like that sort of stuff I hate in Yu-Gi-Oh! Is when, especially when it's the most popular deck and the mirror match is like awful.
Good at playing into themselves. I'm trying to think if there's an exception, but I can't think of one right now. So Malice and Yummy were never extremely good at playing into themselves, and then Dragon Tail was a completely fine mirror.
Is that true? Because this is from someone who has played the least amount of Malice necessary, okay, to understand the deck. But I felt like if Malice, for example, of course, Malice, if you're playing a Malice mirror, you still have to hand trap your opponent so they can't do the full combo, which is kind of the thing with any deck. Like no deck beats the full combo. But like, let's say your opponent makes like a half board in Malice. Isn't Malice kind of like okay into its own interruptions because they're like banishes, right? I guess maybe it's different in the OCG because they have Appaloosa, so maybe if they get Charmied, they end on Apple, and that's terrible. Oh, that's, I mean, yeah, okay. The half board of Apple makes a difference, I guess. Maybe that's just not true in the TCG, because in the TCG, I genuinely feel like the Malice mirror is not like the worst thing, right? Whereas like if your opponent ends on Cryptor or the 07 banish because you have like Charmied them, I think Malice itself can play well into that. Maybe that's just not true if Apple is in the
match, and it is honestly still not terrible. It's one of the better mirror matches of the format still, but they made this matchup worse for fun with the Floodgate monster.
Oh yeah, that was crazy.
I do think it is a bit overrated. There are actually a lot of ways to clear it. Your hybrid engine, such as K9 or Magistus, should clear the Floodgate with the Psychic Blaster, or
we still need access to it,
or that Fiend that equips. Or you could just fuse Mududu or Green Dragon to play. So the format they're probably right. They're more experienced with the format than me. The Draco Tail, the new Draco Tail support monster might be okay overall, but still the idea behind that is still mind-blowingly weird to me. Like, for context, if you're not aware, because this is next set in the TCG, in the deck building pack archetypes usually get one support card that is from outside the archetype. Like it's basically a free agent card, but it is very clearly targeted at the deck build packs, right? Like for example, Eclipse Twins was that for Ryziel in that set. And then Malice got the little format skipper dude that they actually don't play, and Regenesis got like a level 9 support monster or whatever. I don't remember exactly what it was, but like for these three archetypes, for Draco Tail, K9, and Yummy, Draco Tail got a new fusion monster that just freaking has a floodgate effect for the mirror match, which is so beyond me, like how that was the support they made for it. But incredibly diverse, and the driving forces of the format all play very differently from each other. You can say Yummy and Malice are both combo decks, but they really don't feel that similar. Malice is much more of a deck that crushes you to death with their board, while Yummy, although it has a very strong board itself, is significantly more breakable, especially with non-engine, but it is a hyper-consistent deck and has much better compromises than Malice due to so much of the deck's power being attached to the Link 1. Plus, they have a very different matchup spread because their boards don't share a single interruption. And then Dragon Tail and Vanquish Soul obviously play nothing like these two decks. Another great thing about these being the main decks is that the Justice Hunter decks are very easy to pick up and understand what you should be doing on your turn 1. So there's a low barrier to entry in terms of learning how to play them. But because they do a lot of things on your opponent's turn, there's a lot of skill expression in how you choose to execute your board, which I think is pretty much the ideal deck design.
I agree with this, and I will, to this day, I fail to understand why people call certain decks that have like quick turn 1s boring. It's like, I think it's the way cooler way to play the game if your deck is trying to do less on the first turn, but then has like different ways on to use those interruptions or those cards on the opponent's turn, or maybe plays more on the opponent's turn, rather than just like executing spreadsheet combo number 3 for the Snake Eye deck because you've opened Diabellstar plus original Sinful Spoils and you're supposed to like do this and this and this and this to reach unwinnable end board number 17. Right? I just think it's so much more interesting if decks like get to the point quick and then interact after, right? So like the end boards should never be like the end of the game. I think. I think any deck. Personally, I'm a combo hater. Like too crazy combo. I think I'm a hater for that. If your deck makes an end board that wins the game immediately, I don't like it.
In short, the format is highly diverse, and the diversity of the format has been very fun and refreshing gameplay, without as many blowouts as before. It's just a format where I'm not sure what the best deck is, and I don't think it really matters too much because I think you could play multiple different decks and top if your matchup understanding is strong enough, and especially none of these core meta decks would be a bad choice for a tournament. I personally play Vanquish because it has my favorite gameplay of the 4 the most, but if I played any of the others, I would not say...
Yeah, I think Sunny has said before they really like engines that play on the opponent's turn, and I think K9 Vanquish Soul just screams that right out of every pore.
My deck is holding me back from winning a larger tournament, and most importantly, the gameplay between the decks is actually fun and vastly different. Now I'm going to go into specifics about the decks. It's just going to be a short summary.
I mean, Vanquish Soul as we know it right now in the TCG is a perfect example of this. The Vanquish Soul turn 1 is relatively straightforward. There's still choices to be made based on your hand, like what searches you're going for and so on and so forth. But like the end board of Vanquish Soul is kind of nothing, right, at the moment. But like in a good way, right? Because like you're setting up interruptions and playing on your opponent's turn and stuff like that. It's very, very fun. It was just like slightly not good enough. But like the concept of that deck was very, very cool. I liked it a lot. Of course, there's also the opposite of this where like I mean, if you're the one playing against a deck that is playing on your turn a lot, it can sometimes feel like, hey, can I actually play my turn? But I do think this is kind of like what Yu-Gi-Oh is supposed to be at this point. Like, because if you're playing on your opponent's turn, you are interacting for the most part. As long as we're getting rid of like floodgates and stuff, in like that's a different issue though. But like I think interacting and doing things on your opponent's turn is like inherently good gameplay most of the time.
10 minutes on every single deck going in depth, then we would have a 3-hour video. So I'll start by updating the driving forces. I have videos on all 4 of these on my channel already, but there are a lot of hybrid builds right now, so I'll briefly try to summarize them. I'll talk about Dragon Tail first because it has the most builds. Just off the top of my head, there's a Magistus, K9, Fiendsmith, Regenesis, Primite, and King of the Swamp builds. If you haven't played against Dragon Tail yet, it may seem annoying.
I guess that's also a factor that seems fun about this format, is that it seems like a lot of different decks can be paired and played in a lot of different ways, which I just think is fun because it gives you options and it gives you ways to do things right in deck building, right? Like you can choose the right engines for the right time. I think that's also kind of like what draws me towards Mitsurugi in the TCG at the moment more than like Malice, because in Mitsurugi is like there's a lot of different ways you can build it. You can play like big Ryziel package, small Ryziel package, Fiendsmith, yes, no. You can play pure, whatever, right? There's a lot of decisions to be made when you're building a Mitsurugi deck that all have impact on your tournament run, but they're all like none of those versions is bad, right? It's just all viable, and you just have to be able to compare those to each other and understand why, like the advantages and disadvantages of them and how to play them, because they all play slightly differently. And I think that's cool. And that's what a lot of these decks strike me as well, is like Draco Tail, very strong engine, pairs well with other stuff. You have like the world's your oyster when you're building this deck, and I think that's nice.
Going to not know exactly what deck you're playing against at first, but it doesn't really matter because you can kind of compartmentalize these hybrids based on what they do. I would say Magistus, K9, and Fiendsmith all kind of have the same major purpose in my opinion. You play them because you can build a negate early, which means you can stop insane blowouts, namely Retaliating C, at the expense of losing more to Maxi and Fua. I would say of the 3, this is just my opinion, but I think K9 is the best and Fiendsmith is the worst for this purpose. This is mainly due to the number of draws you can use to make this, as well as how they play into Fua. K9 plays by far the best in the Fua, and Fiendsmith plays the worst. Because if you think about it like this, K9 one draw into Fua is already Ripper, and it's not unreasonable to give them one extra draw and just make the board, or you can even choose to just search follow-up with your K9s and then fuse without making the Ripper to only give them one draw total. While Magistus can make Borload and the mini Verudris, they have less extenders than K9, so even though they have access to their Magistus cards by bridging with Rahu Dragon Tail, that triggers the Retaliating Sea, which defeats one of the primary benefits of the hybrid engine in my opinion. I think K9 is the best Dragon Tail build at the moment just in terms of what is positioned the best in the meta, but Magistus is my favorite to play because it's the most fun. Both are great builds though. My problem with Fiendsmith is that it's short on starters, so you're not really going to draw them. Fiendsmith has the benefit of being able to go into it, but that doesn't really help with Retaliation.
This is the thing with the OCG at the moment. They've done like crazy consistency hits on Fiendsmith, and I don't know, the more I play the current format, the more I feel like the decision of not hitting Fiendsmith in the TCG was actually all right. Like, the way I feel about it is kind of how I felt about Adventure back in the day. Because when Adventure was a huge deal, everyone, and I am including myself on both issues, Adventure and Fiendsmith here, everyone put those cards on their ban list predictions and expectations, and like it needed to be like everyone was like they need to do something about this. And I feel like looking back at it, they never hit the Adventure cards in the TCG, and looking back at it, that was just okay because they knew that they were eventually phasing out of the game anyways. And the thing is, at that point, I'm happy that the Adventure engine stayed at full power, because some decks that still want to use it today or wanted to use it at any point in the last 1 or 2 years, they could. And they weren't like completely thrown off by like, I don't know, Griffin being banned or whatever. With Fiendsmith, right now, the engine is naturally declining in popularity. It's still good, don't get me wrong. Right now, we are not in a format where Fiendsmith is not good. Like, Fiendsmith is a viable version of some decks in the format. I just don't see why that's inherently such a bad thing, as long as it's no longer omnipresent, which it is not. You know, like, there's a lot of top decks at the moment that do not play or need Fiendsmith, because it's just fine the way it is without Fiendsmith. I do think it is still fair to want like Moon to be banned on the next ban list. I'm not saying they should definitely not do that. They could do it. I'm just saying like Fiendsmith is not as popular anymore as it was, even without a ban list hit, which I think is like fine in some ways. You know, I don't feel like Fiendsmith is over popular at the moment, or you'll see it every game, or like anything like that. I think that's okay. I do ultimately agree with you. I think the ability to access Fiendsmith in any deck from anywhere with Moon is a problem that should probably be addressed, because otherwise, like, any combo deck in the future will always be able to make a Caesar at some point, right? And that's like gonna make every engine immune to Nibiru, basically, which is a problem for future Yu-Gi-Oh design, right? So I think Moon is a very good shout. Other than that, I'm pretty sure with just like, if someone draws a Fiendsmith card, I think I'm okay with that. Like, I think Moon is the only thing that I would like to see go at some point. Or Caesar, I guess. I think Caesar could also go. I think that would also be basically the same level of hit, basically, is Caesar or Moon.
Because you had to fuse to even establish 2 monsters in the first place. If it's still somehow completely unhit, I think this build could be good in the TCG. Caesar kill Retaliating Sea is going to be very good, but we're just missing too much of the Fiendsmith engine here in the OCG. Next is Primite. I wish I could say that I am someone who can play any deck as long as it is strong, but I just don't think 100% with logic. How a deck...
Caesar isn't going anywhere with the DDD support coming. I agree with you. I'm not expecting it. I'm definitely not expecting it. I'm just saying from a game balance perspective, I think that would be the smartest. But with DDD support on the horizon, that's probably your answer as to why Caesar didn't get banned in the TCG. So I don't expect it to happen. I'm just saying that's what I would do if it was just for the balancing of the Fiendsmith engine, not considering the other effects, right?
Is very important to me, and I don't like this deck, so be aware that I am biased against almost all Primate builds. I think Primate is a cool engine, and it's good for the game.
Bro hates
but
vanillas.
The package is 6 additional normal summons and 1 normal monster brick if your deck wasn't already going to play it for 1 payoff. So almost all Primate decks are built in a way where I don't like how they feel. Dragon Tail is already a deck with 6 very important normal summons, so the barrel will trade off with these, Murudu is the way you play around Imperm, and Ruxius is your value and consistency normal summon. It just feels very bad. It's a popular build, but I don't like it. Primite can protect against Retaliating Sea, but you have to hard open 5 mana or be able to normal Ruxius in order to...
No, it isn't the smartest since Fiendsmith does the same and engines naturally play through Nib now. In most games, you didn't even go for Caesar. Your name is DDD Purist, and you're just arguing against the Caesar ban because Caesar ban is pretty smart in the sense of balancing Fiendsmith. Don't worry about it. It's not going to happen, but you don't have to tell me it's not the smartest, DDD Purist, okay? It's like the meme with the send tweet thingy, and it's just like Caesar in front of the PC. It's like, yeah, actually banning Caesar is not very smart. Send tweet.
Search 5 mana, but that implies that you open Dark Magician, so it rarely makes Dragoon without activating a spell card. And I guess lastly is something more pure, like a full non-engine or King of the Swamp build. I think King of the Swamp is basically outdated at this point, and the non-engine build has an almost unwinnable matchup in the Vanquish Soul. It's also the worst against retaliating and the targeted hit. That's just my opinion, so of all the hybrids right now, the one that feels the best to me is the K9 deck, for the meta, the current meta at least.
You just love K9 cards, Sonny. You love playing on your opponent's turn.
But I do also think the Magicis deck is very strong. Next is Yummy. I would say the hybrids are Primite, Striker, Pure, and Fiendsmith. And then there's also Purely Yummy, but that's more of a Purely deck than a Yummy deck, and honestly, it's more like artwork synergy than actually being good together. I'll start by addressing Striker. I think that build is still playable, but fell off mainly for reasons I didn't understand before. The first issue is that you don't really want to play just Engage and Hornet Drones because it's 4 copies of the same card, and you don't want to play 1 Hornet Drones or you never draw it. So obviously you want to play a utility card, and Widow Anchor is the best one because unlike something such as Afterburners, it's actionable when you go first. The issue is that Imperm is already not strong right now, so if Imperm is not strong, then you definitely don't want to play Widow Anchor. And then the Striker package just ends up...
That is only partially true, I think, because I do think Widow Anchor has upsides over Imperm. Like, if you're going first, it's possible that a negate is not good, because they can still make use of the body, but if your deck can set up 3 spells in the graveyard, taking and negating is potentially a lot different. Other than that, I agree. But also going second is the same thing, right? Like, the Imperm is probably... I mean, as a hand trap, it's better than Widow Anchor, but as a board breaker on your turn, Widow Anchor has advantages because you don't have to start with it.
Being clunky. There are instances where...
Yummy doesn't really set up 3 spells to my knowledge. Possible. Maybe you would only consider it in a very high spell count version of the deck or whatever, but I'm just answering to the point of, if Imperm isn't great, then Widow Anchor is also, like, bad, which I don't think is always true. Most of the time it's going to be true, but there is scenarios where Widow Anchor is a better card than Imperm.
Widow Anchor is better than Imperm. For example, if you want to play and then use it to stop something such as the Yummy Link 1, then it's actionable there where Imperm is not. I've seen 1 drones. I've seen 1-to-2 ratio on drones and Engage, but it typically doesn't get played at a bigger ratio than that anymore. The second issue is that the extra deck, which was formerly pretty perfect at 15, is actually quite tight now. With the new Link 2 and Starham, and some players also choosing to play the Meek and Echo, this level 3 Formula Synchron to double arc like them, then fitting Kagari ends up having big opportunity cost. You also need a way to kill towers such as Goddess or Mosquito. And also with K9's increasing popularity, Droll is completely back in the meta where it was useless before, and that's another issue with Engage. By the way, I've seen a little bit of confusion around Starham. I think Road of the King explained it a little bit confusing last week.
If this card is Synchro Summon, discard a card, special summon a monster from your grave that was used as material for this card's Synchro Summon, and if you do, it's treated as a tuner. This card is in your grave, you can discard 2 cards, special summon this card with Banshee when it leaves the field. You can only use these each effect of Starham once per turn.
The beast, so you can summon it when you Obedience Schooled, but it's not a synchro climbing tool. It's that the yummies you summon from Starham get their synchro effect, and then you can link it off into the Link 1, so it helps in some weird grind games.
Okay.
Pure Yummy is fine, it's always been fine, and the deck feels pretty good. I would say there are 13 1-card starters, which is on the edge of being consistent, so some players also opt to play maps as well to get over 90%. And then Primite's the newest one. Road of the King explains Primite quite well. I don't have much to add. I think it weirdly makes more sense than Dragon Tail build because Yummy doesn't need its normal summon to be their main engine. so you can play the Primite package without sacrificing your engine to non-engine ratio, but I also would just rather play Pure because I just don't like playing the Primite engine. Malice and Vanquish Soul, I have not much updates for. They're pretty much the same as when I made my deck overviews. Malice, I feel like, is a little bit disrespected at the moment. Like a lot of OCG meta breakdowns I see on YouTube, I see say Malice is the 4th best deck, or they'll say pretty much the order the decks are represented in Road of the King is the order of the deck strength. Malice could be the 4th best deck right now. I don't know for certain, but I don't see it as noticeably worse than these other 3, especially because Malice becomes incredibly powerful the less it's prepped for. So when you consider that all of the...
It's funny because we're almost in the same situation in the TCG right now, right? Malice is losing popularity, but I have a hard time I make fun of it for it because you know me, but I actually don't think that necessarily means Malice is bad. Like the numbers that decks do well in is not always 1-to-1 exactly their quality. You know, there's other factors that lead to these sort of things, like maybe Malice is just not as popular as these other decks, and so the other decks have a better chance at performing anyways, because maybe people are tired of Malice because it's older than these 3 other decks, and people just enjoy the gameplay more of these other 3. But just strength-wise, it might still be on par with them or something like that. There's a lot of other factors in a game of Yu-Gi-Oh! Than just raw power, you know, like believe it or not, but a lot of people, even at the higher levels, like myself included sometimes, we do pick decks based on other factors than just raw strength. Like we try to make meta calls, we try to play that we are biased towards the decks we like more or we enjoy more. This is something that I think almost no one can exclude themselves from. Like I sometimes pick a deck just because I think it looks more fun than another deck if they're close to each other in power level. I'll do that, you know, like that happens. Depends on the format, I guess, but
the top meta decks need different answers. That means you never really have space for Malice, so you basically only have Lancia and potentially Fua to cover Malice. Some topping lists recently don't even side Lancia.
Do they really prioritize enjoyment over deck power more though? See, some people definitely do. I think the higher you go in terms of competitive level, the less often you will find that. But the thing is that it's very hard to quantify power on a deck, right? So it's very often, it's more like a feeling, right? You try certain decks for a certain amount of time and you have a feeling as to how good they are. And like, if I'm playing 2 decks, I have a feeling that they are roughly about the same power. It's hard to make a difference between the 2. It's hard to say like, okay, this deck is definitely better than this one. In those kind of situations, which happen more often than you think, in those type of situations, I tend to pick the deck that I think like is more fun or I can play better, or maybe even that I think is like a better call because less people prepare for it. And like right now in the TCG, if you look at, for example, Malice and Mitsurugi, I don't think there's a super clear answer which of the 2 is better. But I can tell you from my perspective, Mitsurugi seems more fun, and Mitsurugi also has less silver bullets against it, because like Lancia, Chaos Hunter, Meowls exist for Malice, and for Mitsurugi, there's only really Droll Lockbird, and Droll Lockbird, depending on your hand, is also not even always that bad for you. So it's like there is other factors if 2 decks are close to each other that can decide, you know, and it might be the same in the OCG at the moment.
Yeah, it's just complete disrespect. Malice is also one of the best decks into the K9 engine, and also one of the best decks against Vanquish Soul. Malice can try to set up Appaloosa before triggering Izna if they play into Ash Blossom, and because it is an impulse deck, it has more ways to stop the Holy Sue double pop line, encouraging them to go for steal, which is often not enough. Impulse has problems as well because a lot of the best tech cards this format are Earth, and Droll is a wind, so Impulse conflicts with a lot of good non-engine, but it is still a card that is good against every single deck. I tested Malice tonight, and there were 2 Vanquish Soul matches where I won both with low difficulty. It's really bad for Vanquish Soul that they reveal their entire hand to you when they try to interrupt your turn 1. Somehow, the non-engine in Vanquish Soul keeps going lower, and it's already so low. I don't really agree with that necessarily. You can add Case and then more K9s, but you can't fit that many rank 5s, so they end up just being consistency cards for something that you can already bridge into. We're reaching the point where some people are only playing Shifter, Maxi, and Ash Blossom for non-engine.
Will Mitsu go to the OCG 2 eventually? I'm curious how it would fare. They will eventually get it. It's just like there's no set time or set for it, I'm pretty sure. It's just like they'll get it, but we have no idea when exactly.
just 6
At
cards,
least
and
I
that's
don't.
just
Maybe
going to be a
it's
big
been
problem when
announced
you
or
play
something,
against
but I
combo.
don't know.
Now, I'm going to talk about some rogue decks.
It's always September. Oh, is it all? Do they always get like an import pack in September? Okay, apparently it's September.
The reason I think rogue decks are strong right now is because they can beat the meta decks without high difficulty, assuming the pilot understands the matchup. So I'll start with decks that haven't
This
been
deck seems
released to the
scary,
TCG
dude.
yet.
Luna Light seems scary.
The first one is Striker. This is the first time I think Striker has been remotely competitive since it got released. Sky Striker is a deck that is probably not as strong as the top meta decks. It struggles with Vanquish Soul in particular, but since it always had an engine that was strong going second, it produces a hand that can break boards very often. Let's take the best board in the format, for example. I would probably say that's a Malice board. Actually, the best board is the Morganite board, but the Malice board is the best one in terms of what is consistently
Don't
being
say
made by
Morganite
decks.
board.
It is very reasonable for Striker to break the Malice end board if they draw a strong enough hand. If you hit 3 spells while having 4 or more cards in hand, it becomes very challenging for the Malice player to have enough interrupts without non-engines such as Ash or Impulse. Or Droll Lockbird, of course, but that will just one-shot you regardless of deck. And you don't really want to summon...
The more I'm thinking about future Yu-Gi-Oh, the more I feel like we need a replacement for Droll and Lockbird. And I say replacement on purpose because I don't think you can just ban Droll because there are some strategies that'll just go crazy. But I think we need to talk about like that card. I think Charmies do a lot to replace Maxi, and like they should probably ban Maxi soon in the OCG as well. They really should. The Charmies are doing their job. You know, Charmies are popular. Charmies are good. They help going second a lot. People cannot use them going first to back up their boards and shit. Like they need to get rid of Maxi, but that's a different story. Joel and Lockbird, I think, needs to go. And then because we need to get rid of that lingering stuff. That isn't a Charmy. Like if the hand trap is lingering but it's not a Charmy, I think it's just far too toxic overall as a concept because it just invalidates too many things. The problem is some of those things deserve to be invalidated. Is the thing with Droll and Lockbird. There are certain combos, certain stuff that needs to be punishable by a hand trap. Because if all these combos from now on are going to be like immune to Valor, Imperm, Ash, Nibiru, because the decks are getting better into those cards naturally, right? That's just something that happens at the moment. Like decks are getting better and better and better at beating those kind of hand traps. I think Droll and Lockbird at the moment feels like a necessary evil, but I wish it wasn't, which I think just means they need to do something that like is similar. My personal suggestion was a Molt Charmy that is shared ride, basically not stopping your opponent from doing something completely, but like basically incentivizing to not do as much, where it's like, you know, it's a Charmy, you can only use it when your board is empty, and if your opponent adds a card, you draw a card, right? So it's like, I think that'd be fine. I think that'd be okay. Personally, in my mind, if I'm playing a deck that searches a lot, I would much rather play against this than I would play against Droll, especially going second, right? That's the thing. A card like that existing would heavily punish certain combo decks, but if you're trying to go second with Sky Striker and break a board, you're not getting Drolled because that's a Charmy card. It can't be used behind the board, which was kind of like another big factor about Maxi. Is like, Max, maybe you can justify Maxi going second, but you can never justify making a board and then Maxi behind it. I think the same is true with Droll and Lockbird. I think you will find so many examples where Droll and Lockbird going second is 100% justified, but if someone makes a board and then Drolls you behind it, it's just not fine, you know? And I think that would be one solution that I actually would love to see. But I think that is a major thing about the future of Yu-Gi-Oh, because Yu-Gi-Oh is just not fun if you're under a lingering Droll and Lockbird. And the more decks they make that ignore these kind of other hand traps, people are going to flock towards Droll and Lockbird like they're doing right now. And that's going to be, it's just not fun gameplay. Dude, even playing Droll yourself is not fun gameplay, I think. Because Droll and Lockbird still, in its nature, is so hit or miss. Like, there's like so many games where I draw Droll and Lockbird, and I hate the fact that I'm forced to play that card. But I feel like at the moment, it's almost like, I mean, it's got to be in your main deck or side deck for Raziel Mitsurugi. Somewhere, it has to be somewhere. But it's just not, it's fun for nobody. With Droll and Lockbird, I think. And like, I think that's one of the bigger deals with like just game design future for Yu-Gi-Oh! Because I think I think people sometimes overestimate the importance of, I mean, engine design is of course also very important to Yu-Gi-Oh! But non-engine design might be even more important because that is so like format defining and game defining over the course of multiple years and formats. Like they make a card like Droll and Lockbird in 2000 and I don't know when it came out, 11 or something. It shapes up the game for like years and years and years. They make one archetype that's designed badly. Like, okay, yeah, it ruins a format and then they get rid of it. Or maybe it ruins 2 formats because they don't get rid of it fast enough. But like that stuff is going to phase out. Like if they make bad non-engine decisions, I think that's even worse. And so I think that's why it was so huge that they eventually banned Maxi in the TCG, of course. They finally started hitting Dimension Shifter and Floodgates and stuff like that because the non-engine is even more important than I think like archetypes design. And I think Roland Lockbird is the next big one to talk about.
Like binder to banish 2 of their spells.
I mean, we've been talking about it already, but I think
like
I really think it's time.
Reinforcement of the army, especially when GWC White Binder is the strongest interrupt of the deck, and the deck has 3 Widow Anchors to stop that. The ceiling of Striker is extremely high right now. I think it's better if I go over the 3 new cards first. I actually don't.
Dude. I know I'm getting one guide right now, but after I'm going on all that tangent, how we need a replacement for Droll, the best comment you could have made was, Droll needed or Mitsu become unstoppable. Thank you for listening to my TED Talk. Thank you for listening and comprehending so much of what I just said.
I don't have any of them, so I'll try to put up images instead. The first one is Amatsu. This card is, in my opinion, reads amazing, but is very disappointing in practice. I thought this card would be a lot better than it is because it almost sounds like Phantom Wave Bell. But the 2000 attack point limitation is just far too restricting, and every single good deck can basically ignore the Amatsu at the moment. Maybe in the future meta it will be very good, but right now it is not very good. The second card is Zero, and this card is obviously very good. It searches Engage, but I will say the effect to summon Ray and Rose getting stopped is extremely devastating. I lose almost every time that happens, so it is very, very scary to play the second effect into Ash Blossom, or Impulse, or Called By, for example. The third card is the real surprise for me, Lemniscate. I think this card is very powerful. At first, I'm pretty sure many people thought the same things as me, that Zero was the god support card and that Lemniscate was just a playable card, but it has insane utility. It's always in the graveyard because you can just Shizuku and put it in your graveyard. It lets you dodge Called By, which is completely devastating because Called By on Zero and Ray is very painful for the deck, and it's also an insane game finisher. The way Striker is built now, it is not—
This card, now that I'm rereading it, I remembered it as like a replacement for Hercules base, I think is how I phrased it in my initial assessment of the new Striker cards. But the way I'm reading it now is like, it's also just like an insane interruption, right? Like a quick play spell that can bounce a bunch of cards at once. Feels like it's just like a very strong disruption, because I focused more on the recycling effect, like the ability to just be like to get all the links back into your extra deck, which I think is still a factor for it. But the ability to just like have another interruption that isn't a Widow Anchor, you know, is a thing. Also, I'm also just now noticed, maybe I noticed it back then as well, but you can have monsters in the main monster zone when you play this card, right? It's like it's maybe the only Sky Striker spell that you can use when you have monsters in the main monster zone. I guess multi-roll you can use. But the fact that you can now, instead of having, if you have 2 Widow Anchors, for example, it's a little awkward, right? Because you can Widow Anchor the first one, and if you take, the second Widow Anchor is dead. So you're basically, the first Widow Anchor is only imperm, unless you use both at the same time, but that's not always what you want to do. If you now have the ability to set up 2 spells on your first turn, you can set this one and a Widow Anchor, and then you can just use the Widow Anchor first, take, no problem, and then use the Lemniscate to bounce after. It's no problem. No counter, they don't counter themselves basically anymore. And that's, this card is actually quite strong, yeah.
Not at all difficult to shuffle 6, and even more surprising is that you can shuffle more than 6. I've shuffled 12 before, and if you're shuffling 6 with Lemniscate, then it pretty much breaks every board in the format. Non-targeting bounce is just way too strong. The effect to Link in Graveyard is also very important because it lets you have more interrupts on their turn while searching follow-up. For example, if you resolve Zero effect to summon Ray and Rose, you can Ray into Kagari and then Lemniscate into Azalea, or if you have Rose in hand, you can make Azalea Temperance. Another weird strength of Striker is that it kind of has a Tenpai-like effect where you don't know what they choose to go post-board. Game 1, they'll choose
The
to
new
go first,
Striker deck
but games
seems
2 and
very
3,
fun.
they might choose second, and that
The
makes
new
it really
Striker deck
awkward to
seems very, very
decide.
fun.
Like, I had a game I lost because my hand was Pankratops and Evenly, and they sent me first. But you can't just side going first cards because then they'll catch you with the Solemns. So Striker is honestly quite powerful at the moment, but it does kind of lose to the same things as before. Droll is very bad. I will say Droll is good against a lot of decks right now, but it is the best against Striker. Evenly is going to be very bad. And we also have some crazy people still siding anti-spells, but Striker is absolutely very strong, and I personally think it could top big events. So the second one is Moonlight.
Crazy
This is by far the deck I know the least about.
Anti-spell.
I played against it a few times, just raw power-wise, what it actually does is pretty ridiculous. This deck makes 2 unaffected towers, and both of them Raigeki your opponent because they're soft once per turn, and they also have a spell trap negate.
Dude,
And the deck kills you with relative ease.
This card is scary, man. It's completely unaffected, and it's Raigeki if you have a monster that's bigger than it. This card is kind of crazy, man.
It goes second.
That's
How
a
it plays
crazy
into
win
hand traps
condition.
or what its matchups are, I honestly don't have a very good idea, but it seems strong enough. The way it plays, I would kind of describe it as Fusion Memento, or I guess Memento is a fusion deck, but what I meant is that you can just foolish to search names, go through until you have 4, but instead of summoning the 5k, you make a Towers, and the continuous spell card turns Polymerization into Miracle Fusion, which lets you make a second Towers. If this deck were secretly top tier, I wouldn't be surprised, and if it's too inconsistent or bad at playing into Interruption, then I wouldn't know. But it's also one of the only Impulse decks, and obviously Impulse is OP. Pure K9 is a deck that I think is outclassed by other K9 builds, but is definitely still playable. It still tops, and it's not at all a deck you can disrespect because it's very easy to lose to the end board without any non-engine. Nash or C104 are very good monsters, and Ripper is also a very good monster. It falls off a bit now that Droll is back as well though. And then K9 Crystron is a combo deck, and I did think it was better than Pure K9 before Vanquish Soul was released. K9 just pairs really well with combo decks that already play level 5s because it makes hand trap protection really early and giving your level 5s more utility. The level 5s are only locked from light exceeds, which means you can use them to make your level 7 synchros in certain combos, which is very convenient, and because of Riverstormer, they bridge into each other using Scrap Recycler. I would say Crystrons have better synergy with K9 than Vanquish Soul because Vanquish Soul can't bridge into Vanquish Soul with K9. I respect this deck a lot. I didn't do any math for decks outside of the top 4, so I don't know how consistent it is exactly, but this deck feels very consistent to me. It's not...
It doesn't feel like Vanquish Soul has the bridging synergy, like the K9 cards can't access you, the Vanquish Soul cards, but at the same time, they are also playing them for different purposes, right? Like the Vanquish Soul deck is just playing the K9 cards, I think, at least from my perspective, because they are very good hand traps in general that have the right attributes for your deck, which is something that Vanquish Soul was always looking for, right? Like whenever we build a Vanquish Soul deck, we're looking for hand traps that have the correct attributes so we can always like resolve our stuff. And it's like, well, they are kind of that, right? Yeah. K9 can bridge into Vanquish Soul. Didn't they just say the exact opposite? Didn't they say K9 cannot bridge into Vanquish Soul? How does K9 bridge into Vanquish Soul?
Not a 1-card starter deck, but it has very non-specific 2-card combos, so it feels quite good to play, honestly. It feels more consistent to me than Vanquish Soul because there are a lot of Vanquish Soul cards that don't do anything, like Jiaolong unless you have 6/6A and Holy Su, or Borger and Caesar without a normal summon. In my opinion, Crystron is probably the most consistent deck of the format and making a massive amount of negates. In a previous video, I discussed Whitewoods making a ton of Omni negates, but it honestly struggles to access those Omni negates in a lot of games. This deck makes 6 of these interrupts pretty much every game with low difficulty. Ripper, Nash, Izuna, which can make the Chronomaly on their turn, FA Dawn Dragster, Cyber Dragon Infinity, SP, the level 9 Synchro Monster, which banishes 3 cards on your opponent's field or graveyard, their Trap card, which pops 2 face-up cards. Dark Ruler will help, but no one is playing that because it's not really good against the rest of the meta, so it's better to just play other generic cards. It has problems, of course. Droll, Lancia, and Shifter are very good against Crystron, so that's something to consider. People say Crystron is good against Lancia because you can just play with your K9s instead, but that's kind of like saying Malice is good against Lancia because they just play with their ad inningsters instead. Sometimes you just don't draw those cards, and I would say this deck's fall off is mainly because people think Vanquish Soul is better. It has much better blowout compromises. It's the far better deck at going second. It is highly resilient to blowouts such as Tikaboo and Shifter, and can even play those cards themselves. But Crystron is very dangerous. It's one of my least favorite decks to play against in the format, and was something I was seriously considering before Duelist Advance. The next deck is Onomat Ryziel. This is a very popular deck at the moment. The way I would describe this deck is that it is a full combo deck. It really does not play like Ryziel at all. The build with the max Goblinbergs and the double Ouroboros to rip 4 cards out of your hand turn 1, that build I don't think is that good. It does that combo extremely easily, but it's more of a targeted counter. Like the amount of times I pulled off the hand rip combo were against Vanquish Soul, which isn't necessarily the main decking the tools to stop a Go First FTK deck. The build with a much smaller Onomat package and only 1 Ouroboros, and the extra deck to fit utilities such as Exciton and Tornado Dragon, that one is basically just Ryziel, so I think that one is a bit better. It has more going second tools, but I think it's just worse than Ryziel, and even worse is that because Ryziel's so hit, it's not easy to bridge into your Ryziels into a board. So I think it ends up just being a worse deck than Ryziel was, which was not necessarily going to be one of the best decks in Justice Hunter format anyways. So I'm going to go over a couple of older decks now. The first one is Memento. So Memento does not match up terrible against the top decks that aren't Malice. For example, if you look at Yummy,
now it's just a format discussion
and surprise bounces.
I mean,
these are not the best interrupts to have against Memento.
Whitewoods, Orcus.
Targeting pops and flips actually might be the worst interrupts into Memento, and they definitely don't win going second. So for the Yummy player, they basically have no choice but to make Arclight during their turn 1 every single time. It's not even about having negate.
Sunny not putting K9 everywhere challenge.
To floodgate their goblin, their horse, and their sleepy dump, and also fusing
K9 is kind of a very
if they must
popular
make the
engine
Arclight,
in the OCG
then they have no
right
choice
now,
but
you
to play
know?
Nib, and also just having any breakers such as Pangratops or Raigeki is clearing the Arclight, and then they're playing engine to engine where it's not good. Now, they could be on the Mikaneko build where they make 2 Arclights, and in that case, you will probably lose, but you know, if you lose coin flips to those players, then it is what it is. Dragon Tail also does not feel bad at all. The issue with Memento is that it lines up horrible with the non-engine right now. Bell is popular for the first time in forever, and that means they can just trade with your Memento fusion, and Retaliating Sea is obviously a massive problem as well, and everyone is citing that for Dragon Tail. K9 is everywhere, and Ripper Negate is also quite annoying. It's just not the best time to be playing Memento, even though engine to engine, it's actually fine. I tried to fix this. I tested K9 Memento for a bit, and to be honest, it felt pretty good. It insulates against Retaliating Sea. It doesn't cost any meaningful deck space since Izunas are hand traps, and Jokul doesn't clog your horse because it just brings it out. But then I thought about it, and it's like, why am I playing K9 Memento when I could just be playing Vanquish Soul instead? The popularity of the deck was always low though, so I think it's even less represented than it could be. I was pretty much the last Memento player in my city, so if I'm not playing it, then there's not really going to be any Memento players. Whitewoods is another combo deck. I never really liked this deck because it just seemed like an outclassed combo deck to me. It plays poorly into Droll while something such as Memento doesn't, and it's actually the worst combo deck in the Droll because Malice and Memento ignore it while the K9 combo decks just play with Ripper and Izuna. It bricks more because it has random engine requirements that are only there for the combo such as Curse of Diabel. I know it sounds like a lot, but there are only 8 spells and traps you actually want to send for your Whitewoods effects. 3 of those are
I do feel like Whitewoods, as much as the current Whitewoods or White Forest power level or the end board and the game plan of White Forest is still somewhat cringe, I still feel like power level wise, this deck is kind of where I, as someone who doesn't like combo, I'm kind of like willing to accept a combo deck at this sort of power level where it's not the best deck in the format, but it's like playable to the point where if someone really wants to play a combo deck, they can play it. I think I have an issue with combo decks when they become like stronger than that level. When it's like overly popular, overly powerful, that kind of thing. I don't know. It's kind of just something like I've come to terms with the fact that combo decks will exist and that you have to like respect them in Yu-Gi-Oh! Because I mean, let's be real, combo decks are not going to completely be extinct, even in Justice Hunter format. But it's just like, as long as they're not everywhere and as long as their power level is somewhat balanced, as long as they have weaknesses, I think it's okay. Just like how I feel like almost any playstyle should probably be represented somewhere at a playable level.
Field spell, which lock you out of your Azumina cards. So a lot of games, you don't have a good send, and then it becomes very expensive to play. Its nib protection also comes later than other combo decks unless you open Azumina access. By the time you've gone through Selene Apo, if you started with the field spell, you've most likely also gone through the Rhoda, the Quick Play, Rushiela, Diabel, and Elzat Azumina Search Wanted. So you'll probably still win because you'll have the Sin Adjudicator set up at that point, but it's just something other combo decks don't have to deal with. It's not an excellent deck going second because its engine is just there to access your extra deck, and also the 1 to 2 card starter combo isn't even as strong as the other combo decks. The ceiling of Whitewoods is pretty much the highest, but you basically need 3 engine cards in order to access all of the interrupts. You won't make Barone, the Azumina cards, or access Woes unless you open other engine, for example. But if you manage to send Wanted and the Sin Adjudicator to make the Saint Azumina, then you'll win every time. I'm not trying to make it seem like it's a horrible deck. It has charming lines, but most decks do at this point. It's still one of the strongest decks going first when it can play, and it is very popular, so you will see it in tournament. I just never thought this deck was better than other combo decks in the format. And then the last deck is Orchist. Orchist is a deck where I feel like it is something you think is an insane deck when you play against it, but then when you play as Orchist, it feels very bad. This is just...
I had this... When I was still under the impression I was going to play German Nationals this year, before they announced the Master Duel qualifiers on the same weekend, Orchist comes out before German Nationals, and I tested Orchist a little bit, and because I felt like the concept of the deck sounded so good to me, where it's like it's a mid-rangey deck. It doesn't make the craziest end board, but it's got pretty solid 1-card combos. You know, like all things considered, the end boards that Orchist makes with the new support are pretty all right, pretty strong actually. Nothing too crazy, but pretty strong. And it's like, oh, it has non-engine space. It can play Impulse and everything. Like, it sounded so promising. But then you play it, and you actually just realize it doesn't have enough starters. It's so frustrating. It just doesn't have enough starters. Because the new Link monster that they get, you need an Orchist for it. So if you start playing cards like, I don't know, Scrap Recycler or Armageddonite or whatever, that technically are also 1-card combos, you get hand trapped on those, you cannot do anything. You are passing the turn. So, yeah, I don't know. I haven't, and then the more fancy you get with deck building with Orcus, like let's say you play like, I don't know, Allure of Darkness and Orchestrated Return or whatever at multiple copies to get the deck more consistent, all of a sudden you don't have enough non-engine space anymore. I don't know. It's weird.
My opinion. But the deck is not excellent consistency-wise.
Yeah.
If you just count the 1-card starters, there's Girsu and Harpor, and then 2 goods, and then the real Foolish Burial, and also Prosperity.
It's not
obviously
enough.
There's 2-card combos you can use, such as normal summoning Symbol Skeletons, and then sending another Orcus, such as Nightmare. And you can send a Brick Orcus with your breakers, such as Super Poly and Droplet as well. I don't know if we have to go back to some toss format logic and play Armageddonite, Mathematician, Scrap Recycler or something, but you really don't want to do that because you add normal summons to a deck with normal summons already, and then these normal summons don't make the Link 1 and are highly interruptible, so they're horrible in the hand traps as opposed to normaling an Orcus monster. But the problem with Orcus, the main problem with Orcus is that there's kind of just no reason to play it unless you like Orcus. That's always the greatest sin a deck can have. It's not being weak or bad, it's being outclassed, and there's not really an advantage Orcus has over Malice, for example. It plays worse into everything since it loses to both Lancia and Shifter. It doesn't have good Charming compromises, but when it plays, the actual deck is strong. It's one of the few Impulse decks, and the board is smaller than Crystron, Whitewoods, Memento, and Malice, but the board is still pretty much unpassable. There's also no Bystials right now, so that's another thing that helps Orcus a lot. You can easily lose to Orcus if you play any of the top decks. And then I think that is pretty much everything relevant. Some people might be curious about the new lore.
Dude, it sounds like a fun format, though. That's the thing. That's the takeaway from all this. Of course, we yapped about this for way longer than I anticipated, but I think that's the sign of a good discussion video, is when it gives you stuff to talk about for a lot. I enjoyed that.
Deck. People will play the lore deck.
Sounds fun, dude.
As it is right now, it is rubbish. And then Blue Eyes is another one. I think that Blue Eyes is a bit power crept at the moment. I always kind of had a low opinion of Blue Eyes. You can still test it out. It's obviously not incapable of winning. It's just not strong, and I think it aged worse than all of the other old decks. The last deck that might be relevant is Stun. I don't want to talk too much about it because no one ever believes me, but I understand the logic on why Stun is bad. Except there's a devoted group of Stun players where I live who play nothing but Stun or Woman decks, and if they go first, early Morganite, draw the Christia, or Vanity's Ruler, then you will lose no matter what you do. It's not even like the deck is guaranteed to lose going second when they have breakers and cards such as Equation Cannon. And unlike Lab, they play the full Equation Cannon package levels 1 through 7 for Fusion, so the range gets extended too, even if you're a deck that usually cannot get hit by Equation Cannon.
Wait, what did he say? I didn't pay attention.
Equation Cannon, like the Morganite draw group of Stun, but I understand the logic on why Stun is bad. Except there's a devoted group of Stun players where I live who play nothing but Stun or Woman decks, and if they go first, early Morganite, draw the Christia, or Vanity's Ruler, then you will lose no matter what you do.
I didn't even. I was looking at my second screen. What? Okay, dude. Yeah, okay.
It's not even like the deck is guaranteed to lose going second when they have breakers and cards such as Equation Cannon. And unlike Lab, they play the full Equation Cannon package levels 1 through 7 for Fusion, so the range gets extended too, even if you're a deck that usually cannot get hit by Equation Cannon. So lastly, I just want to say, I will most likely be taking a break from the game for a while, despite the fact that the format is so excellent, mainly because I will not be attending a WCQ this season. Every day they let out a couple spots at 1 p.m., but I failed again today, and most of my testing group is in, but there's still 4 of us that aren't, and I can try again.
It's a registration issue kind of thing where I've heard this. I mean, we are starting to get that issue a little bit in the TCG as well, where like, you know, for some of you guys that might just be completely natural, but back in my day, we didn't actually have to get tickets for YCSs. You just went and you just showed up and you registered on the Friday or Saturday and it was no problem. We've reached a point where you need to pre-register for all kinds of you have to pre-register for these events, and there's like actually most of the tournaments do sell out at this point in Europe, right? At least. Where like I think most of the big nationals sell out. Most of the YCSs sell out. I don't know how bad it is in terms of like how long you have to get a ticket. Because I know, for example, European Championship, right? European Championship, I do believe the first wave of tickets, I put myself a timer to sign up for it. And I think the tickets were gone in like 40 minutes or something. So not like the crazy level where you have to like get it immediately or you'll be completely cooked. But you have to be there when the tickets open. And like, you did have to you did have to get it early. Maybe 30 minutes or 40 minutes is not completely accurate. I don't know. I got my ticket within the first 2 minutes or whatever, so I didn't like stay around and check when they were sold out. But they were sold out within the first hour. And this is something that in the OCG, at least for I've heard it from like YCS Japan, is like it's even crazier. Where because it's like, you know, there's like 8,000 people sometimes attending YCS Japan and they're getting like crazy venues for it, but there's still more demand. And like it seems to be a real thing, of course, with when the game is growing, that is unfortunately just a natural thing. And it's like I think it's like especially where I don't actually know which country Sunny is from. Maybe they've said it at some point, but I haven't remembered. It's like if it's like a smaller country in the OCG territories where they don't have super frequent events, like maybe just one huge WCQ, which is the one you work towards, like maybe the entire year even, and they don't have frequent YCSs like Japan does or whatever, and then you don't get a ticket to that one WCQ. I think that can be very frustrating. I get that. I hope they get a ticket still if there's still time.
And I'm still going to be going in person to see if enough people drop out and I can register, but my hopes are low because my friends are also going in person and I'm sure there are others as well. I know Yu-Gi-Oh is a game and it's primarily played for fun, but for me personally, I lose a lot of enjoyment when I feel like I don't have a goal. And it's not even about making it to Worlds this year. I'm not delusional about this. I know I'm not ready to go to Worlds yet. I have gameplay posted on the channel, and then you can watch me play until I haven't reached top level play yet. If the stars align and I drew perfect every single game, Maxi glued to my hand, and I somehow lucked my way into Worlds, I would just not be a good representative for my country. But I really wanted to start competing at the bigger events because it's really the only way I can tell how much more I have to learn. How close am I to reaching top competitive level? Online is one thing, but playing online with flashing indicators telling me which triggers I have is just not the same. And as it is right now, I don't see how it's possible for me to ever qualify for Worlds from my country unless there's an infrastructure change.
Yeah. I mean, even if it's not like, even if you don't think it's super likely you're going to go, I think having the perspective and the ability to try is, I think, important. So I totally get that. And if there's still time to register, you know, good luck. Hope you can make it.
I'm not saying it's easy to go to Worlds in other countries, but in North America, for example, you weren't denied the chance to compete because if you had the financials, you could attend more larger events, as opposed to my country with very few large events, an extremely large player base, and thus incredibly competitive registration. The first challenge is even being able to attend a qualifier, of which there are very few, all capped with registration.
It's weird. You'd hope that if they had high, if like what they're saying is true, if there's a large player base in that country, you would hope that eventually they would move to bigger locations to accommodate those players, right? It's like something where maybe they're just a little bit behind on it. You know, they're still making Allied Code Talker. No, never mind. They're still playing GWC. But like maybe they're just a little bit behind. Maybe they're lacking. Maybe they haven't noticed yet that there's a lot of people missing out on the registrations.
And then there's only one representative for that massive player base. So I just don't see how it's possible. And yes, this is honestly rather emotionally immature by me, and I do have a very poor mentality regarding this, but I am rather demoralized at the moment, and if I cannot attend or end up playing in a WCQ, then I'm probably going to take a break because I really have nothing to play for anymore.
I think that's understandable. I mean, I guess it's still be good if you just said like, you know, screw it, I'm still gonna play for the love of the game. But I do think that that is a natural thing to get a little demoralized over. I think it's somewhat understandable. But the video was good, and I hope you get a slot in your WCQ still if it's possible. Best of luck, and based takes on the OCG at the moment, looking good over there. I mean, I've been saying this, but we got more updates regarding that.